Hello Ignou points, कैसे हैं आप सब? So we are back with another explanation video. So today's subject code is BEGC-103 Indian Writing in English. Assignment for July 2023 and January 2024 session. Attempt all questions. All questions carry equal marks. So there are 5 questions, each of 20 marks. Okay, so let's get started. Explain the reference to the context of the following. First, with candles and lanterns throwing giant scorpion shadow on the sun-baked walls, they searched for him. Though Ezekiel is a poet of the city, in this poem he gives a living, truthful rural pictures. The scene of a mother stung by a scorpion on a rainy night in the village brings in its wake the two worlds of superstitions and scientific temperament into focus. The neighbor swarming like flies and trying to mitigate her pain by various methods reveals the essence of community life. The father embodies the skeptic, rational approach, a telling effect achieved in the last line when the mother heaves a sigh of relief on her children being spared. The experience is distinctly Indian and imagery vivid and sensitive. The neighbor's concern for a speedy recovery is expressed through lines that the infectionary is effect. Night of the Scorpion evokes superstitious practice we haven't still outgrown, enacts an impressive ritual in which the mother reaction towards the end to her own suffering ironically cancels out earlier response. Both primitive and sophisticated, the interrelationship between the domestic tragedy and the surrounding community is unobtrusively established. The poem also demonstrates the effective use of parallelism. Next, fed on God for years, all her feasts were monotonous, for the only dish was always God and the rest were condiments. Answer. The poem presents a stark contrast between tradition and modernity. On the one hand, the great-grandmother presents traditions and the poet when grow up presents modernity. Tradition refers to the age-old culture that is being transferred to us through our ancestors. Modernity refers to contemporary behavior. The great-grandmother's lamentations for the old collapsing house shows her attachment to the past. But after the death of her husband, the way she leads her life is a fine example to show how the old woman adhered to tradition. She was really simple, fed on God for years. All her feasts were monotonous, for the only dish was always God, and the rest were condiments. When the great-grandmother is on the deathbed, the poet realizes how she lived a life for compromises. It shows the poet has attained a level of modernity and has become critical about the way of the life her great-grandmother has lived. Finally, the poet carries on her life from one city to another, but always feeling sorry that she could not rebuild her ancestral house. The poet listened to her great-grandmother patiently while she described the falling ancestral house. It seems the poet shares her grief and gets sentimental. That's why she assures her that she would rebuild the house when she grew old and rich. But finally, we are made to understand that she cannot keep her promise due to her hectic schedule of city life. She enjoys great-grandmother's remembering the past glory of her childhood, but she felt pity of her life as a widow, hardly eating anything and always remembering the goal. Next. And afterward we climbed a tree, she said, not very tall, but full of leaves like those of a fig tree, and we were very innocent about it. Ramanujan makes use of a number of poetic techniques within looking for a cousin on a swing. In a break from the innocent, few feelings of arousal hinted at the first line. The speaker recalls the words for the female cousin. She informs him and any other listener that the two then went on to climb a tree. Also important to take notes of it is shift from the third person to first person plural. In the first, the speaker tells the listener that the tree they climbed was not a very tall one, but it had other attributes. It was full of leaves like those of fig tree. The fig tree is an important image in this piece. It is in ancient and considered to be one of the earliest tree in recorded history. The tree also features prominently in the Bible as one of those present in the Garden of Eden. After Adam and Eve realized that their nakedness in the garden, they used the leaf of the tree to cover themselves. This relates directly to the third stanza, in which the speaker recalls how innocent he and her cousin were together. Whatever they did in the tree, it was simple, youthful, and innocent, befitting their ages. Next, some are purple, a gold flocked grey. For her who was journeyed through life midway, those hands were cherished, whose love has blessed, and cradled fair sons on the faithful breast. And the final stanza of the poem, The Bangle Seller, the speaker continue to advertise their bangles. They shout that some of their bangles are purple and gold flake grey. They are suited for a middle-aged woman who was journeyed through life. They are for her who was raised her children well and has remained faithful to her husband and family. These bangles are, they say, perfect for she who has maintained her household with pride and worships the God at her husband's side. In this stanza, the poet writes down what she perceives as the qualities of a good wife. Such a woman is truly deserving of the purple and gold flecked grey bangles in her eyes. Where he would pay attention to the word sons used to mean offspring. While it could be a happy coincidence, it could also suggest the ingrained attitude of male preference in the society of Sarojini Naidu's time. The poem The Bangle Sellers is a celebration of the female life. It shows us the various stages of a human life, an attempt to represent the Indian culture and the role of Bengal sailors in the traditional setup. Written by the prominent Indian poet and the politician Sarojini Naidu, The Bangle Sellers is a poem exploring the life of Indian women, the Indian culture and tradition revolving around women. In the most of her poems, Sarojini Naidu writes on the theme of Indian culture and people. Her poems are focused on Indian settings, and this poem makes no exceptions in this Indianness. The poem resembles another poem of hers in the bazaars of Hyderabad. The poem revolves around bangles, which is an important ornament of embellishment of women in Indian society. In the poem, the bangle sellers are at the temple fair. They shout out to the people passing by to have a look at their bangles. They urge them to buy bangles for their daughters and wives. Next, discuss the brief history of short story writing in English in India. The rise of the Indian writing in English is at the onset to be located historically. The first connection that we should be looking at is the introduction of the English language as a medium of instruction in India and the introduction of English literature as a subject in the university. Before Indians could write poetry in English, two related preconditions had to be met. First, the English language had to be sufficiently Indianized to be able to express the reality of the Indian situation. Secondly, Indians had to be sufficiently Anglicized to use the English language to express themselves. In 1780, India's first newspaper, Hickey's Bengal Gazette, was published in English by James Augustus Hickey. In 1817, the Hindu College, which later became Presidency College, the primary educational institute of Bengal, was founded. Macaulay's Minute upon Indian education, introduced in 1833, provided for the introduction of English as a medium of instruction, with the claim that the English tongue would be the most useful for our native subjects. While presenting his famous Minute, Macaulay admitted quite candidly that he had not read any of the Sanskrit and Arabic books, and yet did not desist from making such a pronouncements. A single shelf of a good European library is worth the whole native literature of Indian and Arabia. All the historical information which has been collected in the Sanskrit language is less than what may be found in the paltry abridgment used at preparatory school of England. India thus become a kind of testing ground for the launch of English literature in the classroom at a time when English universities were still steeped in the Latin and Greek classics. English was a result introduced in educational institutes, courts, and office, thus dislodging the traditional use of Arabic and Sanskrit as a mode of communication and decommunications. Lord William Bentinck announced in 1835 that the government would favor English language alone, henceforth, and would move towards a knowledge of English literature and science through the medium of English language alone. The Wood Dispatch of 1854 proclaimed the establishment of the university at Bombay, Madras, and Calcutta, and thereafter made in English language accessible to student, professor, and also the official of government office. To begin with, the introduce of English at this level had some interesting repercussion. What is projectively called Babu English today become the first offspring of the unholy encounter between the British language and the unwilling Babu. The art and craft and discomfort with which they use the language in the offices and courts become a matter of derision in the arena of literary studies. To English begin the assert itself. The first Indian novel in English was Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, Rajmohan's wife, appeared in 1864. This novel was set in the Bengal village. Through a simple domestic story is highlighted the central concern, that of the virtue of renunciation over self-love. Salman Rushdie, referring to the same sense of artifice and discomfort of the earliest users of the English language, calls this first novel written by an Indian in English did Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, 1838 to 1894, who went on to attain a high stature as a writer, produced other novels in his mother tongue, Bengali, of Anand Matha 1882 and Durgesh Nandini 1890, deserve mention. The period from 1850 to 1900 is the initiative phase when the Indian poets were romantic poets in the Indian grab on in George Bottomley words. Matthew Arnold is a sari, or as some derogatively observe, Shakuntala is a miniskirt. The chief source of inspiration were the British romantic poets Wordsworth, Scott, Shelley, Keats, Byron. The period from 1900 to 1947 is the assimilative period when the Indian poet, still romantic, tried to assimilate the romanticism of the early 19th century British poets and the new romantics of the descendant period for expressing the consciousness of the Indian Renaissance between nationalism and the political changes, which ultimately leads to the attainment of political freedom in 1947. Stories have always held a great fascination for us, and you may remember many stories told to you as young children. Interest in stories is as old as human history. Even before the art of writing was known, early human beings must have narrated tales of the days hunting or stories of gods and demons to one another. These were probably transmitted by word of mouth from one generation to the next. The oldest recorded example is probably the Egyptian tale of the two brothers dating from 3200 BC. The Jataka and Panchtantra tales are Indians' contributes to the world of stories and have continued to interest people through the ages. These, along with fables of Aesop, stories in the Bible, and the tales from the Arabian Nights, are all precursor or forerunners of the short story. Next question. Analyze the novel The Binding Wine and discuss the technique followed by Shasi Desfad in it. Like her other feministic work, this also voices the angst and oppression suffered domestically or publicly by women who are judged with an unfair standard when it comes to the prism of honor, privilege, conduct, right, duties, and abilities. The story revolves around a female protagonist named Urmi. The story begins with the scene of mourning as Urmi is benumbed with the pain of losing her young daughter Anu. Even though she should wail and cry, she finds it hard to shed tears and to let other helpers share the grief. She is consoled by her best friend Vanna and her mother Inni. Urmi believes she deserves such suffering as she had never appreciated the luxurious opportunities that she had received all her life. She struggled with the thought of losing her daughter forever and letting go for her memory. However, as the story progresses, Urmi connects to other women who have also suffered much in their life. She finds courage in their struggle and strength in their defense. Meera, her mother-in-law, the first woman she remembers in her mother-in-law, Meera, she discovered her old journal, notebook, etc. and realizes the unrewarded genuine of Meera's writing. Meera never got recognition as she was regarded as just a woman, a wife, a daughter, a mother, and not a writer. Her loveless marriage and marital ordeal are palpable for me. Her book named The Binding Wine refers to the umbilicus or the physical connect a mother shares with her child. Urmi naturally is overwhelmed with such content. Urmi meets two women. Next, Urmi meets two more women, young Kalpana, who is a rape victim, and her mother Shakutai. Kalpana lies on the hospital bed fighting a battle of survival, but shrouded in forced silence of crime she suffered. The outraging of a woman's modesty brings more question and pain to the victim than to the perpetrator. The author strikes the point of assumed negligence or rampant accusation that follows after such heinous acts. Urmi understands and feels the fear, agony, and the two are going through. Even through this, their stories are quite desperate and unconnected. This scourge of marital rape and otherwise is exposed in the text with unflinching directness and is overwhelmingly brutal. Urmi's struggle with her own past memories and grapples with concepts of honor, dignity, ignominy, marriage, etc. Urmi wants to express the perpetrator of rape, but Shakutai is worried about her daughter's future and possible marriage. Even through her life hangs in the balance while the body lies motionless on the hospital bed. When Dr. Bhaskar encourages Shakutai to impart justice to her daughter and reveals the identity of the criminal, she dissuades him from making the information public. Urmi realizes the constant tug of war women have, the contest between the self and what others see them as. The expectation to confirm the socially constructed image are both scary and impossible to fulfill. Conclusion: the story is a bold and hard-hitting exposition to the life for millions of Indian women who suffer neglect, pain, and even crimes in isolation, silence, and submission. The story foreground theme of rape, violence, loss, etc., but also celebrate the spirit of women and individuals who rise above their ordeals and attain deliverance, victory, and even salvations. Next question. Discuss the style and the theme of poem Kamala Das with special reference to the poems prescribed in the course. The most outstanding and the most striking concern of Kamala Das as a poet is sexual frustration and the failure of marriage as a means of happiness in the life of women. The theme, namely the failure of a woman to achieve happiness through her sexual relationship with her husband, and even through a similar Relationship with other men recurs in poem after poem by Kamla Das. Her poetry is largely autobiographical and confessional. The frustration resulting from total failure of her marriage and search for happiness through indiscriminate sexual relationship with other men constitute a very large component for her poetry. Her greatness in technique in writing poems. Kamla shows remarkable command and ease over the use of English. She has formed a style which is characterized by a colloquial simplicity and clarity. She has a vast range of vocabulary. She understands the precise meaning of words and she can differentiate between the shades of meaning. A command of the English language is naturally the first requirement of an Indian poet writing through the medium of the English language. Since English is most familiar to her, she naturally and skillfully uses it to express her emotions, feelings, reminiscence, her love and sexual experience, her frustration and disillusionments. English authentically mirrors her life. A felicity of dictions and phrase making. Kamla Das' diction is highly commendable because of the appropriateness of the words used and the felicitous manners in which she has arranged those words in her poems. Such expressive words and phrases abound in her poem Fairy, Gulmohar, Sun-Stained Cheek, Puddle of Desire, Skin's Lazy Hangers, An Empty Cistern Coiling, Snakes of Silence, Flamboyant Lust, the Hungry Haste of Rivers, The Ocean Tireless Waiting, a poke-marked face. The words she uses in her poetry give a true picture of Kamla Das' moods and feelings. She deftly employed theme-oriented diction. The use of several remarkable words, phrases, and lines in the Freaks. In the present poem, Kamla describes her husband's mouth as a dark cavern inside which her uneven teeth can be seen gleaming. Here she says that the mind of both of them were willed to race toward love. As they lay together in bed, though the mind only wandered tripping idly over puddles of desire. And then she speaks of her skin's lazy hunger having certainly been aroused by her husband's fingers moving upon her body, but arousing no deeper desire than that. In all these cases, the diction is not only appropriate but extremely satisfactory and even felicitous. The use of images and symbols. Kamla Das' images are drawn from the familiar and the commonplace, and they poetically reveal the poetess' own life, her unfulfilled love, lust, and sexual bouts, agony and anguish, sterility and inner vacuity, sadness, disease, sickness, and death. Wish are expressed through the images of human bodies, sun and a heart, burial and cremation, nature, sex, sleep, and the myth of Radha and Krishna. The image of human body are frequently used in Kamla Das' poetry. The beauty and the glory of human anatomy attracts her, but its ragging lustfulness disgusts her, and it becomes the image of ugliness and corruption. She abhors the male body, which destroys female chastity and individuality, is expressed through images of horror and ugliness. The lover who ignores the emotional fulfillment of the beloved and indulges in sexual act has a poke-marked face, is a pretty snob. The tasting of sins, his mouth is a dark cavern which stellicities of uneven teeth gleam. His lips are like petals dying at the edges, burnt cheek, and the dry grass of your hair. He is old fat spider weaving webs of unwilderment. Omission of punctuation marks and varying length of lines. Kamla Das' poetry is made by her omission of punctuation marks, and this way her poetry was difficult to read of an average reader. The commas and inverteds are oftenly missed in her poems. There are also found a great variation in the length of lines. Some lines are long, some are too short, and some lines have only one or two words, and the sentences are bewildering. Sometimes there is an omission of complete letters at the beginning of the line. Next, critically analyzed the story The Other Woman by Deena Mehta. The Outer Woman was published in the collection of short stories named after it. The Other Woman, The Other Stories 1981 is both a humorous and a highly ironical account of the domestic strife between the protagonist Magan Lal and his wife. The story is a comment on shallow sophistication and a superficial understanding of the aesthetic that is completely divorced from the actual and the mundane reality of our life. Mangal Lal is a married of 36 who suffers from insomnia or the inability to sleep and is afraid of the dark. It is night and has switched on all the light in the house except from the room where his wife Vimla is fast asleep. He sits at his reading desk to work on his manuscript, but his thoughts are on his wife who has accused him for something serious and then has fallen asleep in the middle of explanation. This strain of humor is interspersed with the most serious moment throughout the story. We are told that he had married 3 years ago and marriage to Vimla had shattered his fanciful image of a docile wife. Also, at the time of the marriage, people had suggested that he had won the hand of Vimla only due to his wealth. As Vimla's brother had squandered away his dead father's money, leaving the family destitute. Magan Lal, however, had not paid attention to these stories at that time because he was proud of his success and script writer for 6 super hit Hindi movies and considered himself a brilliant writer. Magan Lal admits that his scripts are copies of Hollywood movies to which he had added the right mix of all popular ingredients like comedy, fusion music and dance, romance and action. But this doesn't, to his mind, take away anything from his brilliance. He is proud of his creation, the character of Jit Bharati, played by the actor Nikhil Fernandez, who has become a superstar because of his script. In fact, he is conscious of a secret wish to possess Nikhil's good looks, which he suspects are appreciated by Vimla too. Despite her strong denials, Vimla's brother, however, makes fun of him and his writing. We are brought back to the fact that Magan Lal is thinking about all this sitting at his desk with the manuscript. He tries once again to concentrate on his work, but his mind drifts away into other thoughts. The story is continued by relating Magan Lal's thoughts as he sits there. Magan Lal's friends often urge him to give more time to his family jewelry business that to his writing, and it is here that we come to know to the source of Magan Lal's riches is the jewelry business and not his successful script. However, Magan Lal finds satisfaction and pleasure in his writing and the success of the movie, even though all the profits are minded by others. It is on this subject that he and Vimla have a heated argument. Vimla, with his degree in English literature, expressed her opinion that her husband's stories lack aesthetic depth. Notice that Vimla does not ask Magan Lal to write something original or different, but to follow people like Satyajit Ray, Mrinal Sen and Samuel Beckett, who are admired for their artistic endurance in filmmaking. The point to the fact that Vimla's conditioning, part of which derived from her education and the part from her brother, has led her to respect and admire a particular kind of art and disdain another. Magan Lal does not understand much of Vimla's critique of his work, but is very upset that his own wife should look down upon the writing he is so proud of. He gives vent to his frustration by asserting that he is the master of the house and would do as he pleased. However, he is no longer able to write about Jit because Vimla's criticism brings down his own dissatisfaction with the bumption or conceited character to the surface. This is how he first loses his sleep. After many days of restlessness following this incident, Magan Lal decided to write a new kind of story on which Vimla would be proud of. He begins devoting all his time to the script and works late at night on it. Moreover, unlike his previous work which he discussed with Vimla, he keeps this script secret from everyone. The story now takes a most humorous and ironical twist when we are informed that Bimla, with another mistakenly attributes Magalna's changed behavior to the assumption that he is having an affair with another woman. To add to the irony, Magalna's confusion at the sudden charges convenience Bimla of his guilt, and all this explanation falls on deaf ears. The subsequent days are spent with Bimla trying to make Magalnath confess the name of the image other woman, and her method for doing so involve everything from seduction to prayer. It is at the time that we realize that the night when the story opens has followed just one such day of bickering between the husband and the wife. The story now brings us back to the present with Magalna still sitting at his desk without having written anything. But dawn is approaching and tired Magalna returns to his bedroom to sleep for a few hours. He is woken up by the sound of voices from the living room. It is Sunil, Vimla's arrogant, good for nothing brother who claims to disdain money, is favor of higher things in life, but often borrows it from his brother-in-law. Vimla leaves the two men alone to talk. After making a rude joke about the fact that he had not thought a dull man like Magalna capable. सो यहाँ हमारा असाइनमेंट ख़त्म होता है. अगर आपको कोई भी क्वेरी हो तो आप हमसे हमारे कॉन्टैक्ट नंबर पे पूछ सकते हैं, हमें कॉन्टैक्ट कर सकते हैं, जो कि डिस्क्रिप्शन बॉक्स में अवेलेबल है. थैंक यू.